Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by rockauto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 250. And joining me on our Zoom podcast today, our writer, two-wheeling reporter, Brian Robinson.
So happy to be here, John.
Great to have you with us, Brian. Over the Edge reporter, Greg Carlos.
Hey.
Who is also our producer of the podcast, and our online content coordinator from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Jessica Ray.
Hey, how's it going?
She's the only one we know that didn't have snow around here this year. All right, we've got three cars to talk about. We've got a lightning round, a viewer question from Bob. We'll see if anybody's got a rant and rave. Let's start off with a vehicle that I'm not sure a lot of us really thought would make it, and that's the all-new 2022 Mitsubishi Outlander. We've been fans, I think, of the Outlander for a long time, and we've currently got the outgoing model in for a long-term test, the hybrid version. So who wants to start? What is the 22 and what isn't it?
Yeah, John, I don't know if you were watching on Amazon Live. I was live.
Yeah.
That was the first car launch on Amazon Live, which, I mean, in hindsight, wasn't that dramatically different than anything else we had seen. I guess it was more accessible to, just people who aren't in the industry, and there was supposedly conversation happening, but it didn't seemed a little contrived. But yeah, so like you said, John, we have an Outlander PHEV right now, which has been in our service for like nearly 2 years at this point.
Not quite, but close.
Yeah. The new one seems quite a bit bigger. It now has standard 3-row seating, so seating up to 7 people. Starts at $25,000, just under $26,000. The big thing for me, though, was the updated technology, because in our Outlander, we've commented that it really needed an update, which they've done with an available digital gauge cluster, which it's pretty amazing what they can do with these gauge clusters these days with the new screen technology. Just all throughout the cabin, it's just a much nicer place to be, and will be a lot more comfortable, too, with the extra space.
Brian? Whoops, your mic's off.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Sorry, played some internet gremlins this morning. It says a lot about the current Outlander, which we have enjoyed a lot, but it says a lot about it when they turn to the Nissan Rogue to enhance their driving experience. But I think the Outlander is definitely an underrated vehicle. It looks a lot more rugged for sure. The interior greatly improved, which is probably the least favorite thing about our current one. It's just the interior is super black and not inviting, and this one seems much more I wouldn't say luxurious, but more of a comforting demeanor to it. But I think while we know a lot about it, there's a few things that we don't really know, and I think they're the most important things. They said it's an all-new 2.5 liter with CVT. I don't know if that means it's really an all-new engine or if it's just the Nissan Rogue's 2.5 liter in CVT, which to me, again, that's not a great thing, not a bad thing, not a great thing. And they also said it'll have their all-wheel control, which is phenomenal. Their all-wheel drive system comes from Mitsubishi Lancers back in the day. Will it really be that all-wheel control, or are they just renaming the Nissan system all-wheel control now? So those are the kind of things that I'll wait and see for most.
For people that don't know, Mitsubishi is now part of the Renault Nissan organization, and the new Outlander is based on the Rogue. And yeah, it's like when they say all new, it's like, is it all new to you, or is it just, or what is it? Or did it come? It looks like an awful lot of the technology is Nissan technology. Jessica, your impressions. It's a pretty brutish looking vehicle.
Well, you can sort of also tell where it gets, it looks like the Nissan Rogue a bit. It shares a lot of those characteristics. I think it certainly looks better on the outside than the outgoing model. But what is interesting to me is the standard 3-row. They've decided to go all in with the 3-row. which I guess makes it probably one of the cheapest 3 rows that you can buy on the market right now. I know Greg said it was like around 26, but with the destination fee, it ends up being closer to like 27,000 when it all comes down to it. But that's still under 30,000. You can get a 3rd row. And while it's probably going to be a relatively cramped 3rd row, some people like the idea of having a 5-seater, but might need that extra seat, an extra seat here and there. And, you don't sacrifice a ton of space because these 3rd rows just fold flat. So I think that's impressive and lets the Outlander, I think, stand out in a way where if they want to sell more, it really needs to stand out.
They haven't said anything about, they have said they're going to keep selling the current Outlander PHEV alongside it for a while, and they haven't said anything about whether or not there's going to be a PHEV or anything else for the new one. I suspect at some point, but it'll probably, my guess, and it's only a guess, it'll show up in the Rogue first. So that's always kind of a weird thing, but at least they'll be able to serve that PHEV market, which, I remember when we started with the long term of that PHEV, we all were like, it's an interesting powertrain in a very old vehicle, but when you look through all of our long-term reports, the praise for the vehicle outside of its dated interior has been huge. So I think it's good that they've continued to offer it, even if it's a small take on it.
I think it's kind of a rebuttal to, we hear a lot of comments about people saying there's just no affordable cars, particularly SUVs.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case. I mean, it's great that Mitsubishi is able to come out with something like this. And granted, it's not going to be a luxury vehicle, but it is. And speaking of the Mitsubishi we have now, man, it's a darn good vehicle. I don't see why anybody would be upset at that price point.
Plus also that if they're using the more Nissan componentry they use, the more easy it's going to have to be repaired after it gets old and gray. So a good move all the way around. And it's amazing. I mean, I think 5 years ago, we thought that brand was toast. It's going away. Okay, let's move on to the Hyundai IONIQ 5, the first all-electric utility, if you will, from Hyundai. Who would like to start?
Well, I'm looking at it right now on our website. That's the beauty of doing our virtual podcast like this.
Yeah.
I have all the information available to me. It is a sweet looking vehicle for anybody who's listening and not watching. It looks like a concept vehicle. I mean, it has
It looks a lot like that. What was it? Concept 45 they showed 2 years ago.
Yeah,
that was my question. Is it actually the production vehicle or is that a concept?
Everything I've heard and read is that it's the production vehicle.
All right. Well, then that does look incredibly awesome.
With the sharp edges and all, it's kind of a throwback in a way, but I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, and it's not, it is a crossover, but it's not like a taller off-road ready crossover. No. It's more of like one of those low slung, maybe a little bit lower than maybe a Mach-E or a similar style, but really cool looking. Has a lot of.
I'm waiting for Brian to say it's really just a station wagon. but anyway. That
doesn't sound like me at all.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah, but it's so to more things that for people who are listening, it's 2 battery options, 58 kilowatt hour and a 72.6 kilowatt hour. If you want to get down to decimal points, either rear motor or all-wheel drive, which would put motors on the front and rear axles. The interesting thing, so it's standard with 800 volt charging, which will eventually be the new fastest charging station you can have. Unfortunately, not everything's there yet. So it is 400 volt compatible. And I think, John, you might be able to correct me. It's the first vehicle that can do either 400 or 800 volt without any additional hardware.
I believe it is, but to my knowledge, I'm not even sure there's any 800 volt systems up and running in the United States at all.
They're future proofing at this point. Yeah. Eventually, hopefully we'll get there. But if we do get there, they're saying you can get from 10% to 80% charge in like 18 minutes, which is pretty darn good, up to 290 miles of range. And It's yeah, pretty sweet looking. The other cool thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that you can actually charge other things like bikes or scooters from the vehicle. So it's actually like its own portable charger.
I think they probably looked at what Ford was doing with the F-150 and said, oh, that's a good idea. Brian.
I think they're, correct me if I'm wrong, they're actually launching IONIQ as an exclusively EV brand. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a new sub-brand. That's right.
Okay, much like Genesis is their luxury brand. I get it. The IONIQ is, it's a car that, I mean, they've had for a while as an electric car, plug-in hybrid, a regular IONIQ, and it really flew beneath the radar, I think. I think it was a great vehicle. It's been out since, I think, 2017. They've had the EV. I don't know if they were ashamed because it only had a 124-mile range or what, but I don't think they promoted the vehicle hardly at all. I think it was actually a great vehicle. So I'm a little taking the leap to now take that and launch a whole brand out of it. I think will be challenging, but it sounds like it's certainly got the technology to make it an impressive vehicle.
I mean, I don't have any hard data to support it, but I think branching the Genesis brand off has helped. I think a lot of people have a much better perception of Genesis as its own brand than when they saw it as like a Hyundai Genesis. And, and I'm not saying it's a valid argument, but I know a lot of people who think of Hyundai and Kia still, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to buy that because of what I used to hear about them. And I try to tell them that's not the case anymore. But I think Hyundai probably has to think about that at the very least. So I actually think it might be a good move to kind of separate the IONIQ brand because, again, just look at Genesis.
Yeah. I mean, what I like about the IONIQ 5 specifically is the interior. It's very simple and also
cool. It's real cool with the two screens.
Yeah. I mean, has very futuristic look inside and out. And certainly something that a lot of people seem to dislike when it comes to Teslas or even the Mach-E is the large tablet style infotainment system. They don't like that. So this is certainly much more traditional, but still very attractive looking. And I think it also should be said that we don't know the EPA estimated range quite yet. It will be under 300 miles. It'll be somewhere probably close to that, but it will be under 300 miles. So I don't know, it seems like it does seem like a good starting point for launching the brand to be pretty close to that 300 mile mark.
Yeah. I don't know that it'll be that high because that's based on the kilometers from the European cycle, and they do theirs a lot different than ours. They're generally, you can't just translate it from kilometers to miles to get a range. I think it'll probably be closer to 200 than 300, but
Same thing happened to Porsche with the Taycan. They were expecting these huge miles, and then the EPA got it, and it was much lower.
Yeah.
The EPA numbers, and I'm picking a little bit of a number out of the air, but I think they've tended to be 10 to 20% less than the European cycles. And that will probably be for the big, whatever the high number is. If it's 290, let's say it's 290, that'll be the big battery with two-wheel drive. And then it'll be probably like the Mach-E, drop 10% when you add all-wheel drive and go down from there. So, and there was a very interesting test I read of the Mach-E where somebody up in Washington State, we're getting off topic a little bit, took a premium model, which is supposed to have a 270-mile range with all-wheel drive, and he did pure interstate travel at 70 miles an hour, and he got 203 miles. So when you open them up on an interstate, it goes pretty quick, which I think is part of this whole problem of everybody launching all of these fully electric vehicles without really knowing where the American buyer is going to stand for that. But that's a whole nother podcast. I do think the IONIQ 5 is a pretty interesting looking vehicle. And a good
when
first
we get
track.
on that whole other podcast. when we get on that whole other podcast, we should also talk about where all the electricity is going to come from to charge all these vehicles, since we've recently noticed it doesn't take much to really mess up our power grid.
Yep. I mean, if Texas can handle a little extra power, I'm not sure who can. But again, that would maybe be even another podcast. Okay, let's move on to our third vehicle for today. This is the 2021 Mazda CX-30 2.5 Turbo. Who wants to start? Jessica, you've been pulling up the third place and all this. You want to start out?
Sure. So I didn't actually get to drive the CX-30 Turbo, but I did drive the Mazda 3 Turbo, which has that
same powertrain.
I actually really enjoyed when we had the CX-30 in last year for testing when it first came out. It's certainly an interesting vehicle, and I have to be truthful, I wasn't exactly sure where it would fall within, like how well it would do with Mazda, but already so far it's done really well. And I really like that engine in the Mazda 3, so I imagine it was a nice boost of power as well in the CX-30. And I think one of the best parts, maybe not the best parts about it, but one of the things that is the most attractive to me is the fact that the fuel economy doesn't suffer as much as I thought it would, compared to the regular 2.5 liter engine in an all-wheel drive model. It's 26 combined in the base engine with all-wheel drive, and with the 2.5 turbo, it's 25 combined. So
you don't lose much.
Right, exactly. So you're getting that boost of power. It's a little bit more expensive, but you aren't suffering so much when it comes to fuel economy, which is still very important to people.
Yeah, and like Jessica was saying, the CX-30 slots in between the CX-3 and CX-5, and but it instantly has become their second best-selling model, because the CX-3 was just too small for me anyway, to be a practical vehicle, and this is like exactly the right size, I think, and shoving a much bigger engine in there, 250 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque, is absolutely a great thing as far as I'm concerned. They upgraded the all-wheel drive system to handle it, and it's somewhat capable off-road, but even they were like, even hardcore off-roaders, particularly in California, where, everything gets engineered these days, at least here in the US, you've got to drive a couple hours on the road just to get to a decent off-road trail. So they're like, at Mazda, we're not sacrificing that road time to get to the off-road trail. So, like everything, they made it even better on the road. And it's just a really good engine. We've talked about it before with Mazda, trying to put a more premium feel in their vehicles. And that's part of it, having more power than you need, and it delivered in a way that is very responsive, is part of that premium feel. I think Mazda's always been a little bit apart from the Honda, Toyota, Nissan crowd. I think now they're almost like an Audi of the Japanese car makers, something a little bit special and unique take on things. That's my take.
Well put. Greg, anything to add?
It's cool that, it's kind of like a hot hatch with, it's a raised hot hatch without all like the wings and all the extra aero features on it. I mean, if you're just looking at power numbers and the fact that it has a hatchback, 250 horsepower is a lot for something like that doesn't weigh as much as, some of the traditional SUVs, or at least what people think of traditional SUVs. And I have to agree with everything Robinson says. Mazda, between the style and the newly found interior, premium feel of it, they got something that separates themselves from Honda and Toyota quite a bit.
We do like their products. There's no question about it. Okay, let's move on to our lightning round, where we basically just chat about something that's been in the news and see if we come up with any brilliant opinions. The United States Postal Service has finally chosen a new delivery vehicle. We're not quite sure if it's going to speed up the current situation they have, but it's coming. They've basically given the military vehicle folks at Oshkosh Defense they've been awarded a 10-year contract to build the Next Generation Delivery Vehicle, or NGDV. And they're going to build it in the great state of Wisconsin. It will be equipped with either a fuel-efficient internal combustion engine or a battery electric powertrain, and have the ability to be retrofitted as technology evolves. We've all seen the current vehicles. We've all heard the stories about problems and catching fire and burning up mail. And these new ones won't be coming for 2 more years, I believe. But what do you think about it? You saw what it looked like. Somebody can describe, if people haven't seen it, describe what it looks like, since it is different.
I'm looking at it right now, and I can give a fairly decent description. So it has a similar front end if you're looking from the profile of what we've seen, but then it gets super tall super quickly. So it's like a super upright windshield.
Big windshield.
Yeah, think European, like Sprinter vans. Now everybody, even American car companies, have switched to that European style tall side, so where that you could, theoretically stand up in the back. And side note, if you haven't driven one of those vans, you might think that they're super top heavy. To a degree, I guess they are, but they're actually really nice to drive.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to find other things in my brain to say. You've probably got something ready.
No, I have nothing great. I was just going to say that as long as it gets the mail to me on time,
You
I
don't
could care less what it looks like. The biggest thing I learned out of the whole thing was that the current ones are based on Chevy S10 frames. I had no idea. I did not know that. But anyway, that's all I got.
That's
I
a
didn't
good
know
piece.
that.
Yeah, I think I'm a little disappointed because I was hoping that they were going to do more with the EV side of it. I feel like it's sort of time to move on, and certainly I imagine where I live could very easily be a perfect place for the EV side of it. I mean, I know they plan to build some that are EVs already, and then have them be able to be retrofitted, the combustion engine ones. But there's a lot of mystery. Whose EV technology are they using? What sort of range are they going to have? There's a lot of questions. But what is important is that they are going to have modern safety features on them, backup cameras. They're going to have air conditioning, which they don't have now.
That'll be huge.
It's
for a lot
so
of people. A lot
huge.
of postal-
I didn't even know that. My poor postal ladies driving around here in the summer times without air conditioning. That's really, really tough. And of course, it looks bigger. It's taller and it's longer than what we have now, because I mean, imagine we just have so much, a much larger volume of mail than we have ever before.
Too much online shopping, man. Everybody's got to chill with that.
It's never going to change either. It's only going to go up from here.
Yeah. Do you remember when email was going to put the post office out of business?
Yeah. So I was talking to my postal person, a very nice man who's been, and he really has made it through snow and ice and everything else. And he was very excited, of course, when he saw the pictures, and he's very excited about having air conditioning. But of course, he asked me the question that I couldn't answer, and we haven't heard. He said, is it going to have all-wheel drive? And my guess is it will not. They certainly didn't mention it, because that seemed for him to be the biggest need right now. And actually, does anybody know? I'm not sure it's going to be front drive. I think it's still going to be a rear drive vehicle. Anybody know? Probably still is. Just for the wear and tear, rear drive pulls up better.
There's
I
still
see
so much
nothing-
that's not known about it,
Yeah.
actually. It's a
The company has a long history. The company has a history of working with GM, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some GM componentry in there somewhere.
Ultium battery technology.
Yeah, who knows? Anyway,
Super Cruise.
it can't come soon enough for him, I think. Okay, let's move on. We have actually a question from Bob, and it's a really interesting one. How did 0 to 60 miles per hour, how did those times kind of become the performance gold standard that we use to measure cars and trucks of all ilk? He said he started driving in 1961 and it was popular then. And of course, we still use it. He just said he was curious. And I think several of you have done a little research. Anyone got an answer to Bob's question?
I had trouble tracking the exact origin down. It seemed like everything I clicked on was like misleading. It said, the title of the article would be like, how did 0 to 60 come about? And then they're just like, oh, well, it's kind of racing, but there was never really an answer for why it's 60 miles per hour. But I think when you get down to it, the roots are in motorsport, like drag racing, muscle cars, and things like that. But I think
60 used to be fast for a car.
Right.
Think about, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That was getting on.
Yeah, I mean, you have just some standard passenger cars and even SUVs that are getting there in like 4 seconds now. So I think the bigger issue with it is not like maybe some people put too much stock into it because it's not something many people will ever experience on the road or need to. I'm kind of in between there. Like, I understand if you're pulling away from a stop and need to get up and go quickly. Not all engines are built the same. Not all cars deliver power the same way. So I think it's an important test to run. I just don't think necessarily you need to like live and die by that number. Like, we're talking sometimes tenths and even hundredths of a second.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for Bob, but I was kind of heading where Greg was going there. I know if you talk to powertrain engineers, they hate it because it does absolutely nothing to describe what an engine does and what it feels like and where it makes power. If you bring it back to Mazda, they spent a lot of time talking about with that engine, they never even look at 0 to 60s. They look at how it delivers the power when you want it. Coming out of a corner, when you're downshifting to get on a highway, passing, stuff like that. They could care less what the 0 to 60 numbers are, but they know that everyone else will compare it. And that's it frustrates them. It's similar to the safety aspect of cars. Volvo for years was a leader, but they were a leader because they did their own thing. They came up with their own ideas. Now, we have all these tests and everyone just makes the car to pass the test. No one's coming up with new ideas to go to that next level of safety. Everyone just wants to get a 4 or 5 star rating or whatever it is. So I think it was similar to that. It's like, are we really, hampering innovation just because we're all focused on this arbitrary 0 to 60 figure? That's my rant. Sorry, Bob. No good answer.
Here. Robinson 2024, man. You got my vote.
Jessica, anything to add?
I don't really think I have much to add on this conversation other than, I think I agree with Robinson about it not being an incredibly truthful way to sort of talk about the driving experience, depending on in what situation you're in. Although, it'll certainly be interesting because Tesla's saying that they've got a sub 2. So,
and that brings up, we haven't answered Bob's question. Bob, we don't know, but we everything we've read says basically it came about either through illegal racing, street racing, or sprint car racing, or it has that basis. And of course, the Europeans have adopted the same thing, but at least over there, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour kind of sounds logical. And that's roughly 62 miles per hour. And that's the standard they live by. But I have 2 comments, and this is only because I'm so old. Number one, I remember the days when we used to make excuses for European cars because they were slow to get to 0 to 60, but they had this high top end that made them effortless cruisers on the Autobahns where there were no speed limits at the time. And now, of course, they're as fast as anybody else, if not faster. And my other comment is I think 0 to 60 is now going to become less relevant, if it ever was relevant, because as electric motors are added to internal combustion engines, all that instant torque is going to make everything fast. I mean, we've seen just in the last few years, the measure of what is acceptable drop from 10 to 9 to 7. And soon I think it's going to be 5. And if it's not 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, it's going to be like a poke. And again, to Brian's point, people don't drive that way unless they're insane anyway. But it is an interesting number, and I think it's going to probably continue to be that measure to compare people for a long time.
It's
I've
really
actually-
hard.
Certainly Tesla's embraced it. What?
I was going to say, I've actually had people complain that they don't like when we run 0 to 60s because some people
Because
think
we're
it
slow.
No. That's a different comment, Greg.
Yeah.
The real world, folks.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think we've mentioned it before, but ours are just, the best time we can get that day. And there are so many
Yeah.
variables that go into it: track temperature, air temperature, tire condition. It can literally be a day-to-day thing. And also, if you're out there wanting to match magazines' times and our times,
Yeah.
it's so hard on your car. Just don't do it.
Plus, a lot of the times you read, especially from some of the big print publications, they use a computer algorithm. I mean, you could say theirs is more scientific, and that's true because they use a computer algorithm to correct for temperature and wind and all of that stuff and track conditions, and we don't. We sort of like whatever we run, what you brung, and whatever we get, we get. So, but
I was just going to say that I get occasionally a grumpy old man who thinks that we're influencing young people to drive really fast.
Of course. That's understandable.
Because not everybody needs a car that goes to 60 in 5 seconds.
No, but you're going to get it whether you want it or not.
I
Okay.
feel like that's one of the best questions we've ever gotten.
I
And we
loved
didn't
it.
give poor Bob
Yeah,
a good answer.
Good. It is. It opened up a lot of discussion. So
Sorry,
thank you,
Bob.
Bob. I'm not sure I know we didn't answer your question, but there you sparked a lot of conversation. Well, it seems like we've done an awful lot of ranting today, not so much raving, but but anybody got anything extra they would like to add before we close out this podcast?
Jessica. I want to hear Jessica's rant.
I have something really interesting, and it's definitely a rant. My mom bought a car a couple months ago, and she's been out of the state. So I have been the one who's been trying to get her car registered. And so, long story short, it's owned by the bank. So the bank has the title, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the title gets to the Department of Motor Vehicle, which we call the MVA here in Maryland. And so they overnighted the title back in January, early January, the first week of January. And I went in a couple days later thinking, all right, I can register the car. They told me no, that the title had yet to be scanned into the system, so they couldn't register the car. So I was like, okay. They're like, check back next week. So my mom called every week for 2 months.
Wow.
And they still had not scanned in the title. So I decided the state inspection was going to run out. It had almost been 90 days. So I said, all right, I'm going to go to Twitter. And I tweeted at the Maryland vehicle, the MVA. And I said, hey, I've been trying to register a car in the state for like 2 months now. What's going on? And they were like, message us with your information. So I sent them all the information, the VIN number, my mom's name, the whole shebang. And the next day they told me the title had been scanned in. And
Way to go.
but so my rant is like,
Yes.
Not everybody has a Twitter to be able to do that. And it shouldn't take me going to Twitter for them to scan a title into their system. It had been 2 months. So I went yesterday and I finally got the tags for the car because her tags, she had to go get temporary extension from the state that she bought it in because she bought it out of state. And the temporary tags were going to expire on Saturday. So I sent her the tags because the car's not even in the state. It was crazy. So that's my rant.
We've all been working from home for a year now, and I know those folks at the MBA are doing the same things, but most of us have figured out how to pretty much do our normal routine over that period. But that's not a great story because you wonder how many more people across the country are facing that same situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I think also should be said that this isn't the first time I've gone to Twitter for like a company or corporation to like get things done. If you message them via Twitter, usually you'll have a better chance of things getting done. So if you're older and you don't have a Twitter, that's okay. You can ask your kids
how to do it.
Yeah. Or ask your kids to do it on your behalf. Seriously.
Gone are the days where you could just call in threats to the building. You just got to go to Twitter and get the people all upset. It's all about self-image. But you are right, though. You make a really good point that companies are very aware of what people are saying about them on social media. So if you're in a similar situation, might be time to sign up for Twitter, no matter how old you are.
We are. I mean, we pay a lot of attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody got anything else? That was a good one. All right, we're going to close out our MotorWeek podcast number 250. And thanks to Jessica and Greg and Brian for taking part today. And we also want to thank the folks that you don't see that make all of this possible. First and foremost, our audio guru, Jim Bigwood, who makes sure that we sound good every week. Of course, Greg is our producer of our podcast. And back at MPT, Bob Mixter, who came up with this whole lane brain idea a long time ago now. Thanks, everybody, for being a part of our show today. If you're not a frequent viewer of MotorWeek, shame on you, but you can go to motorweek.org. And there's my phone, so somebody wants me. And basically take a look and pull down on the tab that says about the show and figure out where we're airing. We're also over on our partner Motor Trend Cable Network. You can go to our youtube.com/MotorWeek channel and see virtually all of the segments we've done and all our retro reviews. So basically, if you've got a screen and you want to connect with us at MotorWeek, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you can do it, and we'd love to hear from you. Till next time, thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by rockauto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.